Hey everyone, welcome. So we've got a handful of folks coming in right now. Give it just a minute or so and then we're going to get started because it's a short session. We have a lot to cover today. But if you want to go ahead and drop your name, your school or the organization you represent, and where you're tuning in from into the chat, we'd love to hear that. See if we've gotten the room here. I also want to recognize we've got some of our university reps from Ireland hanging out with us today. I see Jim from UCD is here, Maggie from UCC. We've got Mary Immaculate College in Limerick, Stella from TU Dublin. Let's see, who am I missing here? See Brady Troy in here, Claire from RCSI. Thanks for joining us, everyone. With that, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Sara Dart. I am the Vice President of Education in Ireland, and I'm based in Boston. And with me, I also have Leisha Moore, our Consul General, whose office is right next door to mine in Boston. And as I mentioned in the audience, we have many of the representatives from the Irish colleges and universities here. So those folks will be keeping an eye on the chat, answering your questions, and they're a great resource. So if you have questions, definitely drop them into the chat rather than the Q&A so those folks can answer. So we are going to talk about how to advise your students on getting an undergraduate degree in Ireland. Everything you need to know in 30 short minutes. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started and kick it off to Leisha, who is going to talk to us about what's going on in Ireland right now.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Can you hear me okay? Great. Okay, so hello, everybody. Absolutely delighted to be joining you all and our friends in education in Ireland to talk to you about potentially going to Ireland and studying. So what I'm going to do is very quickly, because we've got a lot of ground to cover, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what is going on in Ireland at the moment, in particular in relation to COVID-19, because Ireland, like the United States, like everywhere else, we have been grappling with the challenges of COVID over the past year and a half. And I know that you, as higher education institutions, guidance counselors at high school and so forth, you want to send your students abroad to a place to have a wonderful educational experience. But of course, you want to send your students somewhere that is safe, and that's going to be a really important consideration for you. So, I mean, I'm pleased to report that the situation in Ireland looks quite positive at the moment. Case numbers are down, they are dropping. Numbers in hospital are dropping in relation to COVID. And at the same time, Ireland is opening up, lifting restrictions on things like caps on numbers at events and social distancing. Why are we doing this right now? In a word, vaccinations. Ireland has had and is having a really positive COVID-19 vaccination campaign. So right now, almost 90% of adults in Ireland are fully vaccinated against COVID-19. We've had a really, really strong uptake. We started vaccinations a little bit later in Ireland than we did in the US, but the program has really ramped up. The campaign is still ongoing. We are now vaccinating younger adults and then children. It's a similar eligibility to the United States. So children aged 12 and above are eligible for vaccinations. And the vaccinations, broadly speaking, are the same. They're the same vaccines as are available in the US with the addition of the AstraZeneca vaccines. So especially among younger people, the vaccination campaign is still ongoing, but it has been a really strong uptake, which is why the government of Ireland has a reopening campaign underway. And come the 22nd of October, provided those vaccination rates remain high, above 90%, and provided the number of cases keeps stable or keeps dropping, almost all restrictions will be lifted. So, I mean, if you look at overall numbers, like these numbers that I'm talking to you about, one of the things that I find helpful is to compare Ireland and Massachusetts to give a kind of a picture of where we're at, both because I'm based, like Sarah, here in Massachusetts, because Massachusetts, I think, has had a fairly successful campaign against COVID-19, and then also because the size of Massachusetts and the size of Ireland are kind of similar. So Ireland is about 5 million people, so a little bit smaller than Massachusetts, but I find them useful for comparison. So if you look at the numbers of cases, Ireland at the moment lower than Massachusetts. The number of people in hospital is significantly lower in Ireland than Massachusetts. And then if you compare vaccination rates, and you probably know that Massachusetts has one of the highest vaccination rates in the US. Well, in Ireland, it's higher. I actually checked the stats this morning, and Vermont, one of the other states that I cover, has the highest vaccination rates in the US. Ireland is actually higher again. So just to give you a comparison, there are higher numbers of people vaccinated in Ireland than I think in any state in the US, which will give you an indication of the picture where we are at and why we are confident about reopening. It is quite a positive picture. The vaccination rates have also meant that it is possible, it has been possible for Ireland to reopen to international travel. Now, I will say international student travel has always been regarded as essential travel in Ireland. But now we are open to non-essential travel because, again, the success of our vaccination campaign and our dropping numbers. So essentially what this means is that if you are vaccinated against COVID-19 and you can show proof of this, or indeed if you can show proof of having recently recovered from COVID-19, you can travel to Ireland without any kind of COVID-19 test in advance and without any kind of quarantine requirement. If you, for whatever reason, do not have a COVID-19 vaccination, you can still travel to Ireland. You'll be required to take a COVID-19 PCR test in advance, and on arrival, you will be required to quarantine. Now, you can exit from that quarantine after 5 days. If you go, you can obtain a free COVID-19 test, and provided that's negative, you can exit quarantine. It's all about making sure that Ireland is welcoming and open to international travel, but does that in a safe way that's safe for everybody who is living in Ireland and safe for everybody that is coming in. Another requirement as well for everybody traveling in is to complete an online passenger locator form in advance of travel. This is a fairly straightforward online form. I've done it myself on occasion. It's something that you provide your name and contact details for the first 14 days after your arrival before you arrive into Ireland. So look, I just wanted to give you a very quick overview of where we are at with relation to COVID-19. I think my colleagues are going to talk about how the universities and colleges have been adapting to the situation to make sure that they provide their students with a safe environment too. And also, if anybody has any further questions, I'm going to be around, so please do drop them into the chat. And with that, I'm conscious we're short on time, so I'm going to hand it back over to Sarah. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Alicia. So the campuses have reopened. It's exciting news. The students are back on. Many of the lectures are in person. Some of the larger ones may be hybrid or online, but for the most part, campuses have reopened. And as Alicia mentioned, by the end of October, all capacity restrictions are likely to have been rolled back. So it should be getting pretty close to a more normal campus experience. So that being said, the campuses are taking this very seriously. There's been tremendous amounts of work done between the campus governing bodies and government and public health officials to make sure that all the appropriate safety measures are in place, everything from the sort of standard hygiene measures to the wearing of face masks indoors, making sure that testing and vaccination is available to students, and of course, putting occupancy limits as per the government regulations. Want to make sure that all the students feel like they're safe and comfortable. And if you have any specific questions about any of the campuses, our colleagues are in the chat to answer those. We also have organized a greet and transfer service for students, international students arriving into Ireland. And this has been a completely free service. Students just fill out a form ahead of time, and right there at the airport, They're able to be greeted and welcomed and then transported free of charge to their accommodation. And this has been a COVID service that we've been offering, and hopefully we'll be able to, move away from now that public transportation and so forth is back online. So why should you send your students to study in Ireland? I think there's a lot of good reasons here. If you've been to Ireland, you know just how welcoming and warm of a country it is. But aside from that, in the academic sphere, Ireland does not, first of all, require visas for students from North America, which may not sound like a big thing, but if you've ever gone through a visa process, you know what a headache that can be. So the students don't have to worry about that. They get a residence permit once they've arrived, and the universities will help them with that. Many of the universities and colleges are highly ranked by the QS and Times Higher Education. And as such, Irish graduates are some of the most sought after in Europe. And we know that it really is that employability and those career outcomes that students and especially their parents are really looking at when they're looking at where to attend school. So my cat's made an appearance. Sorry, she does that. Moving on, the Irish education system is really built on a practical learning model, so that allows students to gain hands-on experience and build their networks while they're still in school. And we'll speak a bit more on that later. One of the most, I think, enticing things about doing your degree in Ireland is the post-study stay-back visa that actually allows students who finish their undergrad degrees in Ireland to work for a year in Ireland. So they can really use that network they've built and those connections they've made to find a job and get some, post-grad experience in Ireland. So moving on a bit to the academic structure in Ireland, and I think this is a place where it's quite different from how it works in the US, because here often students come in and you do a year of, gen ed requirements and that sort of thing. You don't always need to come in having declared a major. That's quite different in Ireland, where students will actually apply to a specific program, to a mechanical engineering course or to a creative writing course. And the courses typically won't have those gen ed requirements. The students will launch right into the meat of the subject matter that they're studying. Ireland also offers the opportunity for students to do some really unique fields as undergrads. So medicine, law, veterinary medicine, physiotherapy, those are all courses that are available at the undergraduate level. We do advise that students, look at what kinds of requirements they might face to be certified in their home countries after the fact. That is something to be considered. But, for instance, students that go through law degrees in Ireland can come back and sit for the bar here in the US. Degrees in Ireland are generally 3 years. There are some 4-year degrees, and there are some opportunities for students to come in and do a sort of gen ed or bridge year. And those would be more of the 4-year degrees as well as some of the more intensive courses. It's also worth saying that masters in Ireland are typically 1 year, so those are a bit shorter as well. So how much does this all cost? We tend to say that students coming into Ireland from the US are going to pay similar tuition and fees to paying out-of-state tuition at a public university here in the US. And of course, that varies a bit depending on which course they apply to in Ireland and which public university you're considering in the US, but generally that's a good way of explaining it. And on that note, many of the Irish institutions are able to accept federal loans through FAFSA, but loans, not the Pell Grant portion, which I think is a pretty important distinction. In terms of living costs, it's definitely going to vary based on, what type of accommodation the student is interested in doing, and especially in what city or location in Ireland they're in. Dublin may be a bit more expensive. So, whereas I believe Limerick has one of the lower costs of living of the university towns. So that is something to bear in mind, when students are doing their research. All in all, the average cost of doing an academic year of both the living costs and the tuition is roughly about $37,000 a year. So how does this work? When students apply, they're applying, as I mentioned, to a specific course. And the application process requires, of course, the high school transcript. Sometimes will require a portfolio or a personal statement. And when we say test scores, I think it's worth saying that the institutions are test flexible. So what that means is students can submit generally the SAT or the ACT, or can submit a couple of AP or IB scores. The institutions have been incredibly flexible and I think supportive in working with students through the challenges of the last year and a half with the lack of testing availability and so forth. So this is another area where, if a student's interested in a specific university or program, it's important to talk to the representative from that university to find out exactly what will be required. So I think another great perk of studying in Ireland is the ability to partake in the Erasmus program. So you may hear from students that, oh, well, maybe, I don't know if I want to get my degree in Ireland because, I want to be able to study abroad. Students can actually do both. So US students who do their degrees in Ireland can avail of the Erasmus program, which is a study abroad and exchange program within Europe. So for no additional tuition, students could go and do a semester or a year in Spain or in Italy or in Sweden. And as long as they're in at least their second year, they can apply to the Erasmus program. Work experiences and co-ops are another really important feature of Irish education. And a lot of this is owing to the really strong linkages that exist between the universities and local industry. And this isn't just in Dublin, this really is all over the country. And you may have heard Ireland referred to as the Silicon Valley of Europe, because companies like Google, Indeed, Facebook, Microsoft, all the kind of major ones, they all have European headquarters or major operations in Ireland. And anyone who spent time in Ireland will tell you it's a small country. These linkages are strong, so students really do have the ability to do internships, job shadowing, and that kind of networking that's going to be invaluable after graduation. So what is there for scholarships? There are lots of scholarships available out there for students, and they generally tend to be merit-based. Some are full, some are partial, but in terms of where you would find these, many are through the institutions themselves, and each of the universities and colleges will have a great page detailing everything that students might be eligible for. The Government of Ireland offers a number of scholarships every year. When we send out this presentation, we'll include a link to those Government of Ireland scholarships in the notes. And another great way is to follow our Instagram, Edu Ireland. We post a lot about scholarships that pop up that students can avail of. So following that's a great way to know what's coming available. Coming to near the end, we're excited to invite you to join us at our first virtual Study in Ireland fair that will take place on Saturday, October 2nd. So this is an event for students, and of course for you all, for the counselors and for their parents, to come and visit with many of the colleges and universities across Ireland, to chat with the representatives from those universities, ask all of your questions, and really get kind of all of that information you're looking for. I think one of the things that's cool about this event is once you've registered, or once the students have registered, you can actually go in and access the booths and the material to do a little bit of research and prep before the event itself. And then when you log in on the day of, that's where all the representatives will be there and you can have those conversations. As part of the fair, we'll also be offering a number of seminars led by many of the universities with a lot of their students joining in to share that perspective. We'll have sessions on student life, on what it's like to study medicine in Ireland, a session on financing and scholarships, and a session on experiential education and internships, hearing from some students who have had those experiences in Ireland. And so when we send out the information and recording of this session, we'll also include information about the fair, about how to register, and information you can share with your students and parents as well. Now, finally, and I know this is what many of you all are waiting for, we're excited to announce that we will be bringing back the Education in Ireland Counselor Tour coming up in early 2022. The last tour was in February of 2020, right before the world closed down. So we're excited to be able to do this again. We'll be opening the application on Monday, the beginning of NACAT conference week. And so when we follow up on this webinar, we'll include some information about the counselor tour as well. If you're interested in receiving the application link as soon as it opens, you can either use the tiny URL there or the QR code to fill out just a quick form with your name and email, and I'll make sure that on Monday when the application opens, you get an email from me with the link if you're interested in that. And we hope you'll consider applying for the tour. And I just want to close by saying, of course, follow us on social media and get in touch with any questions, but I really, really love this picture. And I think Neve Kavanaugh from the University of Limerick is here in the audience. This is Neve's arm, you can see here, and a whole truckload of pizzas that she's safely delivering to her students last year. And I love this picture because I think it demonstrates how much the universities care about students, care about making them feel welcome, and just really went above and beyond over the last year and a half to welcome them in what was a difficult time. And this is just one picture of the many efforts the universities went to. And with that, I think we will go to questions. So Rupert, I know, has been keeping an eye on the chat, anything that may not have been answered or that we should shout out to the group. So I will.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Thank you for all of that. If anybody does have any questions, please put them into the chat. But there is one here, Sarah, just to read it out for you. There used to be a special program for the Irish diaspora to study at certain Irish universities at a reduced rate and incorporated a homestay. I haven't seen anything about it in a while. Is the program over? Thanks. And I think that was from Janet Mathers.
Jenna, that's a great question. I will confess that I have only been with education in Ireland about a year and a half, so I'm not familiar with this program. To my knowledge, the diaspora population does not qualify for reduced rates at the Irish universities. The rates are decided by the government and are dependent upon residency rather than citizenship. And yes, Neve says that it sounds like a summer school or a study abroad program, which is certainly possible. But Jenna, I'll look into the homestay piece and see if I can come up with anything on that.
And we have another question there. What is the overall schedule for applications? In the States, students apply in the fall by December, hear back on admissions in spring, and then attend the following fall. What does the lead time look for students applying?
Yeah, so admissions in Ireland is typically on a rolling basis. So as soon as the applications are open, students can go ahead and start applying and expect to get decisions fairly quickly. One big difference is that while there is a priority deadline, as long as a course isn't full, students can apply often quite late. Some applications for certain courses will stay open into the early summer. And so it's always worth, even if you're not sure, you think it might be close, it's worth reaching out to one of the university representatives just to check. Thanks, Neve. At UL, they normally get students an answer within 14 to 21 days, which is quite quick and quite different from the way this works in the US.
Great. We've got another one from Jill Caskey. If a student is undecided, how does that work since no gen ed courses?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So while typically a student would apply to something like mechanical engineering at a certain university, there are some programs that are kind of more liberal arts and sciences focused. Those tend to be more of like a 4-year type of experience where a student might take, usually students will have some idea, I think I might want to go into hard sciences or I might want to go into humanities. They'll take certain courses and then can pick a more direct route. I know that UCD has a program like this that's quite popular. I invite any of the other reps on here to throw it into the chat if you also have programs that are similar to that allow students to come in with a bit less of a decision already made.
Right. And Janet also asks, is there a general application like UCAS, or do students apply to individual schools?
Yes, this is something that Jim had reminded me to mention. There is no common countrywide system in Ireland like UCAS. However, some of the Irish universities are on the Common App. And so students can apply that way, or they would be applying straight to the specific university.
Great. And Sarah, Sally O'Rourke's asking, can you talk a little bit about the statement of purpose for the application?
Sure. So a statement of purpose would be, a bit like in the US, a bit dependent on the prompt, or it may simply be, talking about interest in a specific program. Only certain programs will require this. It isn't necessarily a common requirement, but it depends on the program and the specific requirements of that program's application process. I also want to highlight something that I can see Claire mentioning in the chat, that students who are applying to medical school in Ireland apply, regardless of which Irish university, apply through our partner Atlantic Bridge, which is sort of the application liaison, I guess. So students apply through Atlantic Bridge. Atlantic Bridge works with the universities in Ireland. Thanks, Claire, for throwing that in the chat.
So just looking through, no other questions coming through. Does anybody have anything they would like to ask Sarah or any of the HEIs who are in attendance? Okay, Nitzia is asking, for merit-based scholarships, what is the considered looked at to award students?
Yeah, so merit-based scholarships are generally the strength of the application, which, a lot is the transcript and test scores. Some scholarship applications may require, additional materials or have additional things that students need to submit. But in large part, it's on the strength of the transcript and the test.
Okay, got a question from Sarah Murphy. I have a student who started the application quite early for Trinity, but she started the one last year super eager. Does she select new query or to start this year's application? Not familiar with the application lexicon.
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I think you might be right that don't think we have anyone from Trinity in here, but you can either reach out to Trinity or feel free to send me just a really quick email, and I will look into that for you.
Okay, and a quick question from Donna. I'm looking at your website. What is the difference between a college and a university in Ireland?
So in order to get university status, it's like the US, it's a whole process of accreditation and so forth. And I will admit that I don't know exactly what institutions have to go through to get to university status. And this is one where I will invite any of my colleagues in the chat who have a better answer for this to drop it in, because that is a good question.
Okay, how long do students, this is from Sally O'Rourke again, how long do students have to decide about enrolling? Can they apply now, but like in the US, decide in the spring where they make a deposit?
This is a good question. I think it's going to vary by institution. I can see Neve in the chat saying that Ireland has pretty open enrollment dates, or at least at UL they do. I really think this is going to be a university to university kind of question. So I invite my colleagues to drop their answers into the chat here.
Maybe I could roll two questions in one here, but what are the most popular majors the US students go to study in Ireland, and which universities enroll the most Americans?
So I don't think it will be a big surprise to hear that it's universities in Dublin that enroll the most Americans. Dublin is, a city that most Americans know and gravitate towards. So you'll see lots of Americans at University College Dublin and at Trinity College, but I think there's Americans at every institution in Ireland and quite a few of them. The one thing that I think could be surprising to folks is that the number of US students who are doing their degrees in Ireland actually went up during the pandemic, not down. So it's really growing in popularity, I think, at all of the institutions in Ireland. And in terms of the programs themselves, I think historically you would have seen a lot of students coming to do things like Irish studies and humanities, but that's changed quite a bit. I think with all of the tech investment and innovation that's happened in Ireland, see lots of students going for courses in business and innovation, entrepreneurship, sustainability, kind of emerging fields like cybersecurity. Generally, the Irish universities are pretty comprehensive and will offer most areas of study that you can imagine. And anything that maybe isn't widely offered, like visual art, for instance, we have some really great art schools that specialize a bit more in that.
And Sarah, for the virtual fair, which is taking place on the 2nd of October, would you suggest students bring their parents along to talk with the institutions?
Parents are certainly very welcome. I think, one of the nice things about the fair is that students can have these sort of one-on-one chats with representatives from different universities. And also we'll be able to engage in the seminars, while there will be a lot of students, like current students from Ireland there. So it is an opportunity to ask all of the things that they really want to know. I think parents are welcome. It's really up to the students if they are interested in having their parents there as well.
And I take it the high school counselors are also more than welcome to attend as well.
They are, as always, very, very welcome. So we certainly invite all of you, and please, share this with your colleagues. We invite you all to join us for the fair, bring all of your questions, come and visit with the reps, chat one-on-one with some of the lovely folks who have been in the audience answering questions here today.
Right, and I've got a quick one from Cassandra. For the campus partners, do any of your universities have something similar to marine, bio, sustainability, and ecology, etc.?
Yeah, I can see folks chiming in here. I know this is offered at a number of the institutions.
Great.
And I'll let them go ahead and answer, but I think we have had some great sessions on sustainability programs in Ireland, certainly many of those. And, Ireland having so much coastline, we certainly have some really great marine bio programs as well.
Great. There's some great dialogue in there. Thanks very much to all the HEIs for helping answering the questions today. I don't know if there's any final questions or if you had any final comments, Sarah?
Well, I would say to Cassandra there, we welcome your student who wants to save the world. We hope that they will consider Ireland. I think they'll find a lot of great programs. And thank you to all of you for joining us, to my colleagues at the colleges and universities for being so great in the chat, answering all of these questions. And we hope to see all of you at the fair and to see your students there as well on the 2nd. And we'll be following up with lots of things after this webinar, but as always, any questions, comments, anything we can do to support you and your students, please just don't hesitate to reach out.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you to all the high school counselors and HEIs who joined us today.
Thanks. Take care, everyone.
Okay, we'll be sending this round via video tomorrow. Okay, thank you.